Welcome back. Happy Mother's Day to all, and hope you have a great day today. Um, for Mother's Day today, I told Debbie I would schlep her around to all the various Mother's Day events, and that was the thing. Yeah. So, um, ironically, we will be talking about and this is not intentional, but we're talking about a motherless, um, childless mother today. But that's not planned, it just is. On this day, May 11th, some interesting stuff today. Well, it was on this date in 330 that the city of Constantinople, uh, known as Byzantium at the time, became the capital of Rome. Of course, there's a field ground perception theory that, like, once you go buy a car and you think, man, that's a great color. I never see that on the road. And then you buy the car and then all you see are that color car, that kind of thing, that once something gets into your conscious, you see it. And so now every time I turn around, I'm seeing something relating to Istanbul or Constantinople or all of this. So it was on this date in 330 that the Constantinople became the capital of it was Eastern Roman Empire, and then it became the whole Roman Empire shortly thereafter. On this date in 1189, the Third Crusade began. The Third Crusade, this was the crusade, it was called the King's Crusade. It was ostensibly led by Frederick I of the Holy Roman Empire, but included in the crowd was Richard I of England. Richard I, better known as Richard the Lionhearted, went, and this was an attempt to win back the Holy Land from Saladin. So the First Crusade, which had taken place a couple hundred years before, had succeeded in capturing Jerusalem for the Crusaders, and there was a Crusader kingdom there for about 100 years. And then the Second Crusade resulted in its loss. And so now in the King's Crusade, the third, they were going to go win it back. And they came very close, like within sight of Jerusalem, but they stopped, although nobody really knows why. That's one of the great mysteries of history, is why they stopped. But on the way back, so they gave up, signed a thing, and on the way back, Richard I was kidnapped, captured, and held for ransom. Why does this matter, you say? Well, I will tell you why it matters. Because while he was being held for ransom, his brother, John, ran England. And he would have run amok in England, especially with the help of some of his friends, like the Sheriff of Nottingham, who was beset by Robin Hood. So this all lays the groundwork for the tale of Robin Hood. It's set right at this particular time. So the Third Crusade. There were several more, depending on how you count them. I think there were 7 or 8 up until like the 1400s. In 1685, this is the day of the Wigtown Martyrs. The Wigtown Martyrs in Scotland. This was a situation where 2 Presbyterians were killed by a group of Episcopalians. Those Episcopalians, the Wigtown, they would not bow to James the Eighth, I think, of Scotland as being the head of the Episcopalian Church, and so they were drowned. They were tied to 2 women, both named Margaret, and they were like tied to a chair at low tide, and then the tide came up and they were drowned. There's now a stone there and a plaque where they're called the Wigtown Martyrs. So again, another great example of Protestants getting along with each other. Speaking of which, this is a side note. I don't know if you guys saw this, but last week we talked about, I think it was last week or 2 weeks ago, I talked about the fact that Abraham Lincoln had suspended the writ of habeas corpus. Okay, and I said, yeah, this was a Republican doing this, and it was in the news this week that our president is considering suspending the writ of habeas corpus. So who knows what? I'm almost a prophet, or the son of a prophet, or something like that. I said it was going to happen. In 1812, on this day, British Prime Minister Spencer Perceval is shot and killed by John Bellingham in the House of Commons. So the British Prime Minister is assassinated on this day by John Bellingham. Now, the irony of that story is that several years later, after this, descendants of Perceval and descendants of Bellingham, a descendant of one actually ran for or what is it? What Parliament against a descendant of the other. But it was a three-way race, and neither of them won. But just sort of interesting about that. In 1816, the American Bible Society was formed, still operating today. In 1949, Siam was renamed. Does anybody know? Thailand. So Anna and the King of Siam, that whole Siamese cats. That whole thing. It was renamed Thailand, and that is on my list of places I want to go visit. Okay, and here's my favorite thing for the day. This is this. So we'll see who remembers this. So it was on this date in 1959, okay, that the song "Kookie Kookie Lend Me Your Comb" reached number 4 on the Billboard chart. How many remember Kookie Kookie? Okay, this is a fun story. So there's this actor named Ed Byrnes. Okay, E-D-D Byrnes, not the Ed Byrnes of today. This guy's Byrnes was B-Y-R-N-E-S. The Ed Byrnes who's around today is B-U-R-N-S. So a different actor. Okay, he's on a TV. There's a TV show. It's an early police procedural called 77 Sunset Strip. Okay, one of the first things. The star of the show was Ephraim Zimbalist Jr., who many of you may remember from the FBI. The stories you see are true. The names have been changed to protecting. Okay, so you've got this police procedural. Now this actor Ed Byrnes is in the pilot, and in the pilot he plays the murderer and is caught and sent away for execution. But they liked him so much that they brought him back. Never explained why he's suddenly alive, and he's the parking lot attendant next door to the police station. Okay, so you're remembering this. Okay, now his bit, his thing, he had a couple of different things about him. He was a character in that he always wore this like cotton pop windbreaker sort of jacket. Okay, he talked in the very hey daddy-o, what's hip, however the cool kids, however Hollywood thought the cool kids at the, some of you know, because some of you were, talk at that time. And the other thing is that he was constantly combing his hair. So he would always have it. Here goes my. He always had. He'd be talking to you, and he'd start pulling his hair out and do this, and that was his thing. And he was a very popular character in this particular show, and the show lasted for a couple of years. So popular that the singer Connie Stevens came up with this song with him, the actor, and they did it as a duet, where Kookie Kookie Lend Me Your Comb. His nickname was Kookie. In fact, the guy now, if you look him up, is Ed Kookie Byrnes. He kind of never got away from that particular character. Okay, so this song became a hit for Connie Stevens. The next thing is that character, Ed Kookie Byrnes, was the model for what other character later on? Come on, people. I know you know this one. Another guy who at the start wore a cotton jacket and was constantly combing his hair. Fonzie. When they created Fonzie, Arthur Fonzarelli, it was like Ed Kookie Byrnes. Because again, set in the 50s. Remember, Happy Days is set in the 50s, and so this is how kind of thing. So yeah, that was, I go down these rabbit trails. It's like, wow, how about that? A lot of famous people. But other semi-important information. It was on this date in 1969 that Monty Python was formed. The group Monty Python. I was talking to a student the other day because I'm teaching geography now, and this particular student is doing a report on Finland. And I said, well, you know about the fish slapping in Finland. This is an if you know kind of thing. And she said, no, I don't. And so, of course, as a good teacher, I had to find the video of the fish slapping dance, which is a Monty Python bit. And she's just looking at it. You all know that look, right? What is wrong with you people over the age of 25? Because I am just barely over the age of 25. She said, what is wrong with you people? And I said, well, it's a Monty Python. It's from Monty Python. And she said, Monty who? And so I flunked her. That was it. That's you do what you got to do, kind of thing. And lastly, it was on this date in 1976 that the last episode of Marcus Welby, MD, aired. How many watched Marcus Welby? I did. Yeah, just all that. I think that one of the things about that show, if I'm not mistaken, is that it was the first show that would show people in the operating room with blood on them. that before, if there was ever an operating, you wouldn't see it. But Marcus Welby, they would show blood on their hands and stuff like that, kind of thing. But yeah, we used to watch Marcus Welby, MD, um, kind of thing. That's how people used to diagnose themselves. There was also studies about how the week after a Marcus Welby show, whatever the sickness of the day, people would be self-reporting to the hospital for, I have this particular disease. That was back in the day when TV could do that kind of stuff. All right, I know you're thinking, was he ever going to get to the subject? First, let me comb my hair for a second. I'll be doing that all day today. Did anybody watch? I know I'm back at it. Did anybody watch Arrested Development? Has anybody seen the TV show Arrested Development? It's a very interesting show in terms of how it's written and all that. It's this interrelation. It's great fun. But one of the characters in the show is Henry Winkler, who plays. He's not playing Fonzie. He's playing a completely different character. But about 2/3 of the way through the show, the show went on for, I don't know, 4 or 5 seasons. About 2/3 of the way through the show, there was one scene where Henry Winkler is in a restaurant or somewhere. I don't know where he is, but he gets up and he goes into the bathroom. And this is how the show was. There would just be these little things. And they just show him. He goes into the bathroom. He walks up. He pulls out his comb. And he just does, and walks back out again. That's it. That's all it does, But it's those who know. If you know, you know. You're gonna go, hey, I get it, kind of thing. So, all right, we're in 2 Samuel, and we were talking about the return of the ark, the return of the lost ark, something like that. Although it wasn't exactly lost, but and so the last time we had David has settled in Jerusalem. He's made that his central capital, and he wants to bring the ark back to Jerusalem. He's not returning the ark because the ark was never in Jerusalem. He's bringing the ark to Jerusalem, and so he creates this great elaborate procession, and he gets a new cart, and he puts the ark on it. And he starts carrying it. They start carrying it along, and then one of the guys, Uzzah, who had been watching the ark for the past 20 years, sees the cart start to stumble. He reaches out, he touches the ark, and he's killed. So that kind of really throws a damper onto David's plans. And when so they stop and they bring the ark to the house of Obed-Edom, and leave it there. So let's regroup. And I didn't make a big point about it last week, but I will this week. In First Chronicles, now First Chronicles has kind of a parallel story, tells also the story of David, and in some points it's just the exact same text. So we can talk sources on Chronicles all you want, but in First Chronicles, I'll just kind of slip over there. In First Chronicles 16:13, as they're telling this story. First Chronicles. I can get there. See, a good teacher would have had this all lined up here. I was busy with raccoons. Okay, I'm sorry. In First Chronicles 16:13, as David is, and this is not the right verse. Oh, 14:16. No, that's not the right verse. The ark brought to Jerusalem. Oh, here we go. 15:13. Let's just read through the whole book of First Chronicles. We're going to find it eventually. It's in there somewhere. So David is reflecting in First Chronicles on what happened. And he says in verse 13, it was because you, the Levites, did not bring the ark up the first time that the Lord our God broke out in anger against us. We did not inquire of him about how to do it in the prescribed way. So again, in a lot of occasions, you see David inquiring of the Lord before he does something. And now here in this situation, David admits, in Chronicles says he admits, hey, we didn't inquire of the Lord. We just kind of went ahead and did it. And so we have an example here of somebody doing the right thing in the wrong way, which is, I think we're all guilty of it at one point in time. I'm sure I've done it once, maybe. The right thing, that is. I mean, I've got a lot of the wrong way stuff down. I got that part down. No, I'm just kidding. But Seriously, and David again, and we talked about this with David, that David is in a situation. He knows that the Lord anointed him to be king, and so he's kind of trying to feel out, okay, how do I make this happen? At what point do I go and say, okay, I'm king, Lord anointed me, and hope that the people, and it takes 6 or 7 years for the whole process where David is finally anointed king over all of Israel, and it's a tricky thing, even if you have a calling in your own life and say, oh, I know God wants me to do this. I know I have not had this conversation with Pastor Jarrett, but I've had other conversations with other pastors where it's not an unusual thing for somebody to walk into a pastor's office, announce that they've been called to preach, and want to know when they can be put on the preaching calendar. Just some guy off the street or some member that has never done anything in the church says, well, God's called me to preach. When can I preach here? And of course, then the pastor is kind of in an odd position. It's you can go through the whole, well, how do you know God called you to preach and all that kind of stuff, and it's like, how do you make that happen? And my suggestion, if any of you are in that situation, is don't just walk into the pastor's office. Just there are places to preach if you want to preach. Street corners, that you can do that kind of thing, or find places where they're looking for a pulpit supply or something like that. But regardless, so that's kind of the best example I have of just kind of doing things, doing the right thing. It's a wonderful thing to be called to preach. Feel that compulsion in your life. But there are right ways to do this, and there are certainly wrong ways to do it. And here we knew at the time, and it cost the life of Uzzah for David to realize, okay, I have to keep inquiring of the Lord. Okay, I have to keep inquiring of the Lord. And I think if there's a lesson for us, is to just say, you need to keep. Once you get 3 in a row right, that's not okay. Great, I've got this down. I've pretty much figured out. The Lord approved the last 3 decisions. He's going to approve the next 3. Okay, that's not necessarily the way it goes. So the ark is left in another house for 3 months, and that household is blessed. Okay, and the importance of that, and this is in verse. Let's see. I'm back in 2 Samuel chapter 6, verse 11. The ark of the Lord remained in the house of Obed-Edom the Gittite for 3 months, and the Lord blessed him and his entire household. Now that sends a message to David that, okay, it isn't a problem of moving the ark. Okay, so where the ark gets blessed. It's still, God is still with the ark. Okay, so it isn't. He's not going to just abandon us because we made this mistake. Okay, and the Lord blessed him. Now King David was told, the Lord has blessed the household of Obed-Edom and everything he has because of the ark of God. So David went up to bring the ark of God from the house of Obed-Edom to the city of David with rejoicing. Okay, so this is David's plan version 2.0 here. Okay, so it says, when those who were carrying the ark of the Lord had taken 6 steps. Okay, notice they're carrying the ark. Okay, we've got this part down. Okay, we got this. We got some people carrying it, and we know from the Chronicles that he told account that he grabbed some Levites and, okay, you guys need to carry this kind of thing. They went 6 steps, and it says David sacrificed a bull. When those who were carrying the ark of the Lord had taken 6 steps, he, that is David, sacrificed a bull and a fattened calf. Okay, so as the ark entered, I'm saying, wait, okay, let me go back. He, David, sacrifices a bull and a calf. I forgot that part. After they had taken 6 steps. Now, it could be read that he sacrificed a bull and a calf every 6 steps. Okay, it's just, that's one of those kind of, it's like, that's a lot of bulls, that's a lot of calves. Okay, and that's a long time to go 6 steps, wait for a sacrifice, go 6 steps, wait. So most people say he went, like, kind of to bless the start. David sacrifices a calf and a bull here. Okay, now my next thing is, wait, what? David is sacrificing an animal here to the Lord. Okay, what's the deal here? What happened when Saul sacrificed a bull or whatever? I don't know what he sacrificed. He just created the sacrifice. He lost his kingdom. Okay, what's changed? Okay, Well, that's a good question, and I don't have a definitive answer except to say David, we don't see David being told not to do that. We do see Saul being told not to. Okay, so and one of the weird things we'll see here, David playing or taking on, and here's your word of the day, sacerdotal roles. Should I spell that out? Priestly roles. Okay, and at the end of this passage today, assuming we get there, we're going to talk about David's sons being priests. Now, wait a minute, David is not a Levite. Okay, what's the deal? Well, we'll talk about that when we get there. So David sacrifices the bull just so he's sure that this is honored by God, that it's going to bring the ark back the correct way. So when those who were carrying the ark of the Lord had taken 6 steps, he sacrificed a bull, wearing a linen ephod. Okay, now this is a priestly garment, because often through this text, through Samuel, we've heard talk about people wearing the ephod, referring to the priests, and most believe, we don't have a fashion catalog, but most believe it's kind of one of these outer sort of robe things that would hang outside of an inner cloak. Okay, so something that would be clearly something that a priest would wear. That when you saw that, you go, oh, that's the priest. Okay, if you've ever, we have a new pope. There is a new pope. The Catholic Church has a new pope, and what I always find interesting about the Catholic Church, I love the regalia. I just get the biggest kick out of that. I just think that is the coolest thing in the world, and I keep thinking, maybe we should do that us. But in the Boy Scouts, when I'm in the Boy Scouts have uniform and they have regalia, and you can kind of look at something and you can say based on their regalia, you can know, where they've been, what they've done, kind of thing. And like graduations, high school, college graduations have a certain type of regalia that you should be able to, if you have like all the requisite knowledge, you should be able to look at a person, know what degree he or she has, where they went to school, and where they went to school. Okay, you'd have to really know it, because the hood color and the length of the sleeve and the hat and all of this all kind of relate, and so I'm like, okay, what about, and when you see Pope Leo the 14th, when you see him, and now he's in different vestments, different things, I'm like, okay, which of those is like, I'm always wondering, which of those are the Pope clothes kind of thing? I'm not trying to be facetious here, but like, what of that outfit is unique to the Pope that no other person can wear? And what, like cardinals are in red, right? So you don't see bishops wearing red and all that kind of, I just get a kick out of that sort of stuff. Disagree with everything else, but I just love the regalia. I'm sorry, this linen ephod, if you saw somebody wearing a linen ephod, you would think, oh, priest. Maybe today, like you see somebody with a black shirt and a white collar, you would go, oh, priest, right? And so that's a priestly outfit. So David has donned a priestly outfit to lead this procession into the city of Jerusalem. Wearing a linen ephod, David was dancing before the Lord with all his might, which is an interesting vision. I mean, dancing with all his might, dancing before anyone with all your might. That would be, having grown up a very fundamental Baptist, the idea of dancing with all my might is like abhorrent. I think, oh, that kind of thing. It's, I'm not even the right foot in, left foot out, hokey pokey. That ain't happening. And I don't even try it at the wedding you invite me to, because others have tried and others have failed. Come on, it's just a hokey pokey. That's okay. Pardon me? That's right. I am under no obligation to dance at anyone's wedding, kind of thing. And so, yeah, I've been at. Come on, it's just what? There was one wedding we went to. Come on, no, not happening. It is not going to happen. I'm happy that I can walk back and forth without falling. I'm pretty good with the chewing gum and walking. Not great, but pretty good with the chewing gum and walking, and that's about it. No, absolutely no sense of rhythm. That's where I mean, actually no sense of rhythm. Okay, sort of thing. So, but he's dancing with all his might. I mean, he's working up a sweat. He is just really out there putting on a show, kind of thing. Okay, and my son once told us that he had taken up breakdancing. My younger son, in fact, he won a ticket to the prom because he won a breakdancing contest. And we're both of us were like, "Whose son are you again?" I'm like, we ordered the DNA tests immediately, kind of thing, and sure enough, he was ours. We don't know where. I mean, I think it's something from Debbie's side of the family. I don't know, but that's just me. That's just mine. But be that as it may. All right, so he's dancing with all his might. I mean, he's putting up a show. He really is. He's going to town here doing this. With all his might, while he and all Israel were bringing up the ark of the Lord with shouts and the sound of trumpets. So there's no one in all of Jerusalem is going to miss what's going on. Okay, so it's loud, it's visual, it's big, it's a huge event. David, and again, this is intentional. David wants everyone to know that the ark is coming to David's capital, the center of God's presence, the central image, the central artifact or object indicating God's presence is coming to David's capital and will reside in David's capital, in the city of David. He wants everybody to know that. Okay? Everybody to know that. As the ark of the Lord was entering the city of David, Michal, remember Michal? Michal, daughter of Saul, watched from a window. Okay, now it's interesting. She's not in the crowd. She's watching from a window. Okay. And when she saw King David leaping and dancing before the Lord, she despised him in her heart. Okay. Debbie and I were talking about Michal coming in. Well, I'll pause to here. Again, she despised him. Now, what did we previously know about Michal's feeling? She loved him twice. Only time in the Bible. The only time in the Bible you hear about a woman loving a man is Michal loved David twice. It's mentioned. And now, over the course of this event, and now she sees what's going on, and she despises him. Now, things have changed. Things have happened in between that, and we'll, when we get to the last bit about her, we'll talk about it for a minute. They brought the ark of the Lord. Let me see if I'm. As the ark enters Jerusalem, Michal is watching the spectacle. Okay, notice that she is called the daughter of Saul. Right? She's not David's wife. Okay, the author doesn't say David's wife Saul is watching. Okay, David referred to as King David, not Michal's husband. Okay, and she despises him. They brought the ark of the Lord and set it in its place inside the tent that David had pitched for it, and David sacrificed burnt offerings and fellowship offerings before the Lord. Okay, again, David is performing these priestly duties. Okay, nobody is complaining about this. This is, again, I think part of it is he's doing it out of his heart. He's trying to do the right thing, kind of. He's not violating any particular rules, so to speak. David sacrificed burnt offerings and fellowship offerings before the Lord. After he had finished sacrificing the burnt offerings and the fellowship offerings, he blessed the people in the name of the Lord Almighty. Then he gave a loaf of bread, a cake of dates, and a cake of raisins to each person in the whole crowd of Israelites, both men and women, and all the people went home. So he not only did he entertain them, not only did he bless them, he fed them, kind of thing. Okay, so he did this. This is a huge event, kind of thing. Okay, and I mean, you can see, if you really want to go back and see New Testament pictures in there, you see Jesus at the feeding of the 5,000, giving food to the people. But he gives out all these food. He feeds them. Like, wow, this is, how to centralize your command. You got the people all see you. You're obviously worshiping the Lord. You're feeding us. You're bringing the ark to where it belongs, kind of thing. Everything is going great. Everything is working on all 8 cylinders here. When David returned home to bless his household, okay, now exactly what we're talking, whether it is a physical blessing or, I mean, a spiritual blessing of some sort, or just his presence was considered a blessing. I don't, it's not clear. But as he returns home, Michal, daughter of Saul, came out to meet him and said, "How the king of Israel has distinguished himself today, going around half naked in full view of the slave girls of his servants, as any vulgar fellow would." I believe this is, isn't it hell hath no fury like a woman? Isn't that in the Bible somewhere? No, just, it's not. It's not. Just kind of, um, she's not happy. Okay. And, she has, I guess perhaps she has reason to be not happy. She's watching him do what her father was removed from the office to do, for doing. Okay. She's been, well, let me, David's reply, and this is the only conversation we see between David and Michal. We see Michal talking to David earlier when Michal, she warns him, says, "You need to get out of here. My father's going to kill you." And we just see David doing it, and we see Michal covering for her. We see a conversation between Michal and Saul. But this is the only conversation we have between Michal and David. And David's reply, she rebukes David with a sarcastic, heavy greeting. Okay, and again, it's just, then what is it here? Where am I? How the king of Israel has distinguished himself today. Oh yeah, you really stood out today. I mean, going around half naked in full view of the slave girls of his servant as any vulgar fellow would. You know, kind of. I mean, there's all sorts of insults in that. This is the king she's talking about, right? Just like any vulgar fellow would do, right? David said to Michal, "It was before the Lord who chose me rather than your father." This is the Israelite of suck it up, cupcake. You lost, essentially. It was before the Lord who chose me rather than your father or anyone from his house, when he appointed me ruler over the Lord's people Israel. I will celebrate before the Lord. I will become even more undignified than this, and I will be humiliated in my own eyes. But by these slave girls you spoke of, I will be held in honor. He's like, you're out of touch. You don't understand what's going on. So she insults him. She says, "That's a vulgar fellow. Wow, great job. You made a fool out of yourself today." You know, and David is like, "You don't even know what's going on. God chose me, not your father. Your team lost," kind of thing. So it's not a fun exchange. Okay, this is not, when they do marriage counseling, they don't use this example to say, okay, here's how you communicate with your spouse, kind of thing. Um, I will become, and Michal, verse 23, and Michal, daughter of Saul, had no children to the day of her death. So Michal, we don't know how long she lives, but she has no children, and this would include with the previous husband that she had. And so to me, Michal is like, um, what's the word I'm looking for? Not the biggest loser. That's not the right connotation. Um, she's another victim of circumstance, collateral damage to Saul. But I mean, this is a sad, to me, it's a very sad story about her. I mean, and it illustrates to a certain extent the status of women in society at that time, because basically her whole life she had just been a pawn. She had just been a piece in someone else's political game. Okay, she was, and you think about it, even though she's the daughter of a king, she's a princess. The highest hope, a princess, female daughters grew up knowing that their role in life was to be married off to some guy in some political marriage, to secure some political alliance. And the best thing they could hope for was to get married to somebody who was going to be powerful enough or wealthy enough or good enough that they could live in relative comfort. Okay. Now, there are occasions where women were thrown into these particular situations and they came out really well. Like I think of Catherine the Great in Russia, who was just pretty much thrown into this political marriage, and she ended up banishing her husband and becoming the queen of this. Well, I guess she was the queen of Russia. Can't remember the Tsarina. What was Tsarina of Russia for a very long time, and did a very great job of it. Was very influential. But she, people like that are the exception and not the rule. And it kind of talks about this. She was just a pawn. She was a pawn when she was given to David. That Saul used her, thinking he was going to control David. Okay, and David married her. Remember, at first he doesn't want to marry a daughter. Then he marries her because he thinks, all right, this is the next step up the ladder, kind of thing. And then when David and Saul fall out, Saul pulls her away from David, the man she loved. She's a pawn there. Well, I'll show David. I'm going to just take Michael. What does Michael think about this? We don't know. We don't know a thing about how Michael feels about this. She's given to this other guy, Paltiel. Then later on, David, in the power move, when we talked about it, says, you know what? I want Michael back. And so she again, in a political move, she's pulled away from Paltiel. How did she feel about this? We don't know. We know that Paltiel was crying all the way and following her. Okay, and my experience with men dealing with their wives is very few men cry over their wife if they didn't like her. Okay, it's like, so that suggests that there was something to that relationship. Okay, certainly the husband, Paltiel, was getting something out of it. Okay, but and it was very sad to see it end. But she's just used, and now she's back there. She's not even in the crowd watching. Is she not invited? Whatever. She's watching it from a window. Okay, and she's up there thinking, I'm just a pawn in this whole thing. And pretty much David comes down and says, yeah, you are. That's kind of the thing. So contrast, and so again, so my heart goes out to Michael. It really does. I mean, you can sit there and say, well, she wasn't in the right spirit with him. Okay, I get it. Okay, I mean, my heart goes out to Michael. My heart goes out to Jonathan. Now contrast this. This is the position. This is how women were treated. This is just how it was. This is the culture of the day. Okay. Contrast that with how Jesus treated women in the Gospels. Okay. So we're like, again, it's still a very patriarchal culture. Okay. But as you go through the New Testament and you follow the life of Jesus and you see his interactions with women, by and large, he's very kind. He's helpful. He's works with them. He speaks with them. He treats them like humans, kind of thing. So we take our model from Jesus. Husbands in the room. We take our models from Jesus, not from David. Okay, David may have been a man after God's own heart at one point or other in his life. He may have had a lot of good categories. He wasn't a great family man. Okay, I think we need to call it what it is. He wasn't a great family man. I don't think he was a great family man by their standards. He certainly isn't a great family man by our standards. Okay, so if you're going to go see a Bible study on David's rules for family living, just stay away. Okay, just don't go. Okay, but I mean, you think about it. I mean, for a woman to be childless was like the worst fate at this stage, and we've talked about it earlier that a woman in general at this time goal was to have a son. You had to have a son because that was your protection. That was how you knew you would be protected. You would have a son. Because if you didn't have a son, you were at the mercy of the people around you your whole life. And that's pretty much what Michael was. She was at the mercy of the people around her. She was a prisoner. What could she do? Where could she go? Okay. So, any questions? It's a cheery Mother's Day chat today. Happy Mother's Day, kind of thing. And again, David is to a certain extent, David is he's upset because she's not falling in. Maybe she doesn't not falling in with the way he thought it was going to go. And of course he's coming out of his own context, his own the culture of the day. And of course at this point he's got a few other wives. He's got a few other concubines, kind of things. He's got plenty of women that he can get attention from. He doesn't need Michal in that sense. And the thing about it is what we don't know. What we don't know is Michal doesn't have any children till the day of her death. We don't know why. So there's two reasons. Either she did not get David's attention, another with the if you know you know, or the Lord just said you're just not going to have women. I think it's probably the former, and David didn't need to. Again, he's got all kinds of women if he needs them or wants them, sort of thing. But and so thus we end the story of Michal. We're not done with the family of Saul, but let's move on to chapter 7. Any questions? Did I ask that already? Any questions, comments, complaints? Chapter 7. After the king was settled in his palace, and the Lord had given him rest from all his enemies around him, he said to Nathan the prophet, "Here I am, living in a house of cedar, while the ark of God remains in a tent." Okay, so this is half of this sentence is what our raccoon friend is telling us, because I have a cedar deck. So he's out there thinking, here I am living in this house of cedar kind of thing. But he says, while the ark of God remains in a tent. Okay, so David had essentially moved the tabernacle into the city of David somewhere. Okay. And we meet for the first time Nathan the prophet. This is his first appearance. Okay. We don't know anything about him. We just know he shows up. He's somebody that David reaches out to. Nathan replied to the king, "Whatever you have in mind, go ahead and do it, for the Lord is with you." Okay. So Nathan just kind of says, "Yeah, sure, why not? Sounds like a good idea." Nathan is on board with this whole idea of centralizing things in Israel or in Jerusalem. But that night the word of the Lord came to Nathan, saying, okay, it says we meet for the first time Nathan the prophet. David wants to build a temple, and Nathan gives him okay. However, in the next several verses, 2 Samuel 7, 5 through 16, the Lord appears to Nathan and overrules him. Now what we have here is we have Nathan getting the word of the Lord that he delivers to David, and we have David's reply. Okay, that's all of pretty much chapter 7. God speaks, David replies. Okay, and this is the longest or the second longest single speech by the Lord in the Old Testament. Okay, this what he's going to give to David, and what he gives to David is what we call the Davidic covenant. All right, and it's a critical point both for David and for Israel and for evangelicalism. As we look at our lives today, or what do we count on? What does the Old Testament teach us about things like salvation and eternal security? We can go to this Davidic covenant and get an idea there. We don't want to, again, we get an idea there. The Lord's message and David's response are both long and the same size. There's like one word difference in Hebrew between the two, and I forget which one is longer. So they're both like the same size. So they're both, like the writer is saying, okay, we want to make sure that you see David's response is as significant as the Lord's statement. Okay. And then an interesting little TN, translator's note. The Hebrew word translated house can mean either house or dynasty. And we use it interchangeably. We talk about the house of David. Okay, the house of Windsor, which is the current English, the Windsor, House of Windsor, House of Tudor, House of the Stuarts, kind of thing. The House of Bourbon. Okay, that's French. Okay, so we use that in both ways. We talk about a physical house. It could mean a physical house. It could mean, again, a dynasty. And that gets played on as we go through this. Okay, as far as who's going to build who a house. Okay, so David gets a house. He's living in a palace. David has a house. Now he wants to make a house for the Lord. Go and tell him, verse 5, go and tell my servant David, this is what the Lord says. Okay, and he tells him several things, and you can do it in a number of ways. Are you the one to build me a house to dwell in? Okay. The short answer is no. Okay. I have not dwelt. Are you the one to build me a house? I have not dwelt in a house from the day I brought the Israelites up out of Egypt to this day. I have been moving from place to place with all the Israelites. Did I ever say to any of their rulers, whom I commanded to shepherd my people Israel, why have you not built me a house of cedar? Basically, I didn't ask for a house. I don't, have you ever gotten that gift that somebody gives you with good intentions that's going to fix a problem that they see in your life that you don't see as a problem in your life? Some of you are smiling. How many of you got it this morning for Mother's Day? No, kind of thing. Oh, this will be great. This will fix that problem in your life. And you're like, that's not a problem. It's sort of, I don't know, there should be a word for that kind of gift, right? Where, oh yeah, you really have a problem with this. And so I'm going to buy you this expensive thing, and it's going to fix, without talking about whether we both agree that that's a problem, and you think, I like my problem, kind of, I want to keep my problem, sort of thing. I personally, I've never, ever, never, ever gotten that gift. Debbie probably has a few times, from others. No, right there. But you get that gift, and you think to yourself, boy, I sure wish they would have just asked me ahead of time. Hey, I'm thinking of getting you this, and you would have said, you know what, that's great, I appreciate the thought, but no, and so and here the Lord's like, did I ask for a temple? Did I ask for a permanent place to dwell? And the obvious answer is no, he didn't. It's just David thinking, okay, I really want to centralize this, okay? Now then tell my servant David, this is what the Lord Almighty says, I took you from the pasture, from tending the flock, and appointed you ruler over my people Israel. I have been with you wherever you have gone, and I have cut off your enemies from before you. Okay. The Lord reminds David that he was chosen, not earned, or his position was chosen. That's awkwardly phrased, I grant you. Okay. David didn't earn the kingship. It was given to him. Okay. Remember, he was just a shepherd in the. He wasn't even. His father didn't even think to bring him up when Samuel showed up. Okay. So there's nothing special about David that wasn't. Remember, Saul was a handsome, tall guy too. Jonathan was a handsome, great warrior too. We can say, yeah, David is talked about as being handsome and a great warrior, but there were a lot of handsome, great warriors back then. Okay. So again, thinking about this, what did we do to deserve God's love? Nothing. What did David do to deserve the kingship? Nothing. God, God's reminding David, hey, you're there because I put you there. Okay. And I will provide, now I will make your name great, like the names of the greatest men on earth. Okay. And the Lord is making here an unconditional promise to David in verse 9. I will make your name great. Okay. I will provide a place for my people Israel and will plant them so that they can have a home of their own and no longer be disturbed. And now he makes an unconditional promise to Israel in verse 10. I will make a place for my people. Okay, now, where is that? He doesn't say. Just, we think, oh, it's Israel. And it could be, but he doesn't say. Okay. I will make a place for my people, and wicked people will not oppress them anymore as they did at the beginning, and have done ever since the time I appointed leaders over my people Israel. I will also give you rest from all your enemies. Okay. The Lord declares to you that the Lord himself will establish a house for you. Okay, and here, when he talks about a house, well, he's already living in a palace. So he's talking about a dynasty. He's talking about a legacy. And he's saying to David, your kingdom, your house will be a dynasty. Your kingdom will last. Okay. When your days are over and you rest with your ancestors, I will raise up your offspring to succeed you, your own flesh and blood, and I will establish his kingdom. He is the one who will build a house for my name, and I will establish the throne of his kingdom forever. Okay? It says David's descendants will build a house or a dynasty for him. Now, usually we look at this and go, okay, yeah, that's Solomon, because Solomon builds a temple. And that would fit the text. But you could also look at this and say he's thinking about Christ. Okay? Again, I'm not trying to read Jesus back into the Old Testament. That's kind of what we tend to do. But I'm just saying, it's your kingdom, your descendants. So why is it important that Jesus is a descendant of David? Right here. Okay. He's the one. I will be his father, and he will be my son. When he does wrong, I will punish him with a rod wielded by men, with floggings inflicted by human hands. Okay, so here comes. So again, when he does wrong, I'm going to punish him. Okay, I'm not saying he's going to. So this is why you think maybe it's not Jesus, but I will punish him if he does wrong. And it kind of suggests that wrong is going to be done. And here's the key point, verse 15. But my love will never be taken away from him, as I took it away from Saul, whom I removed from before you. Prior to this point, the covenants and the agreements and the directions with the people of Israel would be, if you do this, then I will do that. If you obey me, you will be king. And the promise that God is making to David is that you will be king, your family will be king, you will create a dynasty regardless of what you do. You will always have that position. Okay? And so this promise that God makes to David, that my love will never depart from your household, regardless of what they do, is part of the background basis that we say, how do we know that we can trust God to keep us saved, keep us as believers, keep us in his kingdom despite what we do? Because he promised to David that he's made these promises before. Okay, so when we look at David, say, why is David important for our ideas of salvation today? Because here we have God promising his people, his descendants, the people of God, that my love will not depart from you. I may be punishing you. You may be beaten and flogged, but my love will never depart from you. So why doesn't, again, I'm getting ahead of myself, but David is going to have a couple of exciting years coming up here. He's going to do things to me that are far worse than anything Saul did. Okay? But he's never removed from the kingdom. Because it's after this promise. Okay? Why do we know that if we have truly accepted Christ as our Savior, that we will remain saved even if we commit some heinous sin? I'm not saying go out and do that. Okay? That's not license for that. Because we have the promise that God's love will not depart from us. Just like God's love did not depart from the house of David. Kind of thing. Your house and your kingdom will endure forever before me. Your throne will be established forever. Nathan reported to David all the words of this entire revelation. Okay. Let's see. David's descendants will build a house dynasty. The Lord will punish him, the descendant, if he does wrong. But, and I put it in bold letters, the Lord's love will never be taken away. Prior to this, it had been conditional. If you obey me, and this is why did Saul get moved away? Because his was a conditional promise. If you do this, then this is what's going to happen. Why wasn't David removed? Because God said to David, my love will never be taken away from you. You will not be removed, regardless of what you do. Now, one might wonder, does that play into David's actions later on? He goes, hey, I'm pretty secure. I don't know. I mean, you could. I don't think so, but there's always that possibility. Doesn't matter what I'm going to do, you know. But you still have the promise of punishment. It says, if he does wrong, I will punish him somehow. but my love will never be taken away from him. Nathan reported to David all the words of this entire revelation. In verse 18, we get David's response. I'm going to make this one point about it. Not to be outdone, actually, I'm going to get to the end of this side, and then I'll have page 2 for next week. Then King David went in and sat before the Lord. And he said, this is the only time in the Bible we have a reference to somebody sitting and praying. Just interesting. This is it. It's the only time somebody sits and prays. Usually when you hear somebody praying, they're standing or they're fallen. They're on the prostrate. They're on the ground. Okay. You know, I'm a male getting to that age where the word prostrate, you kind of, but the only time we have it. And now next week we'll talk about David's response, which is kind of interesting. How David responds to this. He doesn't argue with the Lord. He doesn't say, no, really, seriously, Lord. No, are you kidding? Kidding. But any questions? This is what we call the Davidic covenant here. Okay, so we talk about, when you look at the Bible, you have different covenants, different agreements that God makes with his people. You have the Mosaic covenant, the Adam's covenant, the Adamic covenant. You have Noah's, the Noahic covenant, Abraham, the Abrahamic covenant, Mosaic covenant. This is the Davidic covenant. Any questions? Well, again, I wish you a happy Mother's Day. I know this wasn't a cheery Mother's Day sort of discussion today, but it's just kind of thing. And again, a blessing for all of you that are mothers. So those of you who have mothers, be nice to them or say something to them. Don't forget them, kind of thing. And so, all right, thank you very much. And I'll see you guys next week.